Hey, I wanted to share some ear training games that I've been playing lately. And this one I call ear training on white noise. And you might ask yourself, why is that useful? Well, if you're a producer, an engineer, you do any kind of mixing or a sound designer, it's really useful. Just as a musician, maybe it's not that useful, but a lot of people in the past have come to me for ear training advice, specifically absolute pitch, and I know for a fact that they believe that once they have absolute pitch that everything's done and there's nothing left to practice, and therefore you'll be able to go out and sound amazing without trying. Well, that's false. Sure, it's a great thing, but it's not the be-all and end-all. There's lots of ways that you can improve your ear. So this is one of the ways that I'm doing it right now, and it's mainly because I do a lot of sound design, I do a lot of engineering and mixing, and knowing the frequency spectrum is really important. And I don't care if you have absolute pitch, knowing when there's a lot of 250K or a lot of 4K in a mix, that's not going to get you there. That's a different kind of ear. So even though we're dealing with frequency, and I can just prove it here, I mean, you'll have a hard time identifying these as pitches because it's white noise. So I want to show you how I do this. So right here I've got an ES2 synthesizer in Logic, and I've got the cutoff set to my modulation wheel right here, and I've got it on a low pass filter. So what I'm going to do is show you through a multimeter what this looks like. This is what the sound looks like. So if I just hit any key, I'm going to slowly start bringing in. There, I brought in all the high frequencies, and you heard how the sound changed dramatically, right? Well, at first you might just play around and mess around and like see what it sounds like. Okay, let's bring in a little bit of 500K. What does that sound like? How about some 1K? 2K. So you see it's centered around those frequencies. That's where the peak is, and you can kind of tell, oh, that's what I'm bringing into the mix in those frequency areas. Sweeping, though, is not really a good idea. Your ear starts to, it's hard to tell one frequency from the next when you start sweeping. So the thing that I like to do is I like to mute the track. And while I'm muting it, I set it and I have it hover, with the center of a certain frequency, and then I try and imagine what that will sound like. So let me go down to 500K, and I get it set, and that's okay. We'll say that's about 500K, peaking at about 500K, and this is where I'll set it, and then I imagine what that sound is like in my head. And then I unmute it and see how close I was. And if I was wrong, I try and then imagine, well, what frequency was I thinking? Was it higher or lower? And then where should I go to try and get that sound? And so I just keep trying to match the experience in my head. And it's a fun little exercise. You can also do this, I'll move it back to the ES2 with different, like high peak filters, high pass filters. Show you what that looks like and what that sounds like. Unmuted. Now I'm bringing in, so that's just high pass. Now I bring in more low. So it's got a different quality, and it's just another way of hearing the pitch, surrounded by different types of different sounds. There's more low frequency in the other because it's a low pass. This is a high pass, so there's more high frequency. And I'll do the exact same thing with this. I'll try and mute it, and then I'll get a frequency range. So this is just high. Now what happens when I start to bring in some 1K? What do I imagine that all of those will sound like together? And then I unmute it. All right, that's the frequency range from about 1K to 16K. Is that what I thought it would sound like? If not, then what was I imagining, and how do I adjust it to get that sound? And I just keep playing that game. It's fun to do, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes here and there, and just mess around with white noise and see play a little game and see how close you can come to guessing the right sound that you hear in your head. So hopefully you'll find this useful in some sort of ear training application. If nothing else, it's just another way to stretch your ears and test them and gain more experience. It's like wine tasting, you don't want to just stick with one bottle of wine all the time. You want to experiment, you want to try other things, and those broaden your palates. And then when you come back to a previous bottle of wine, you'll taste it in a totally different way because of the experience you've had after that. So that's why I think this is useful for musicians who even don't do engineering and stuff like that. I think it'll help broaden your ears, and when you come back to your regular ear training, you'll have a different perspective. And maybe it'll open your perspective of sound in general, which, as musicians, we're all trying to get different tones. We're trying to get tone out of our instrument. And frequency spectrum is part of that tone. How can you bring in, I played sax for years, and one of the things we tried to do was get a really big tone, by messing with our overtone series and playing the overtone series, and then coming back. When we'd come back to the fundamental after playing all the overtones, the tone sounded bigger, and you'd start to hear a lot of those overtones within the note. So it was a really good practice. And this is a similar sort of thing. So anyway, I hope you found this useful, and thanks for watching.